All right, I have often talked of Ovid, however you want to pronounce his name, O-V-I-D. He wrote Metamorphoses, and there was 15 books, big books, from everything from the creation up to the present time. And the first 2 lines out of this entire book, he says, I'm going to talk about transforming creatures into the natural landscape by the gods. And they could turn them into anything they wanted. They could do anything they wanted with matter, even the matter of their own bodies. They could turn it into rain, into mushrooms. They turned them into hot-looking guys to come down and have sex with the women. That's what these gods were capable of. And the first 2 lines, he says this: the gods and the landscapes. While the poem primarily focuses on humans transforming into other beings, they transformed into anything they wanted. It also features instances of gods reshape the landscape, such as in the creation myth where the god shapes mountains, valleys, and plains. This is made, what we are living on is biology. Ovid Metamorphoses includes stories of gods turning creatures into stone. They did it all the time. And they're all over the place. They still are. Although it also mentions other transformations: plants, animals, stars, fungus, everything. They could turn themselves into anything they wanted. And Zeus, they claim, turned himself into golden rain to rain through the bars of a cage to keep this guy's daughter from being impregnated. And he got her pregnant, and she had Perseus. And that's where we're going to go next, to look about Perseus, because this is just amazing. Perseus is the one that cut Medusa's head off. All this stuff, it appears to be rooted in fact. I'm sorry. If you can just turn away from it, that's up to you. But I'm going to show you what was written and what I can show to support a lot of the statements. All right, this is one of the most underreported, most important texts in history. This was written at the time of Julius Caesar, and it was from a guy named Ovid, O-V-I-D. It's called Metamorphoses, which means to transition from one thing into something else. And the gods could do that to anything they wanted, to anybody they wanted, or to themselves. Now, these are all from the ancient Greeks and the Latin and so forth. And there was 250 myth books, or myths, that he figured out, and he wrote 15 books, 11,995 lines. All right, so this was an epic work. Well, for an epic, although it meets some of the criteria for an epic, the poem simply genre classification because of its varying themes. No, he was telling the story of what the early myth, which is not myth. All right, and he wrote it out so people could understand what they were saying. Whether they believed him or not, probably not. But he started out with book 1, creation, ages of mankind, Deucalion and the flood. Deucalion was Noah. And it comes all the way down through all of these historical figures: Perseus, Andromeda. And this was all true stuff. Now, they make it sound like it was silly, but this is so deep and detailed. You know, Hercules, and I mean, just all of them, every one of them, Achilles, on and on and on, Ajax, Ulysses. And then the first 2 lines, in nova fert animus mutatus duceris corpora, which means, I intend to speak of forms changed into new entities. That's line 1 and 2. Accompanying this theme is often violence inflicted upon a victim, whose transformation becomes part of the natural landscape. These were gigantic creatures. They could make other gigantic creatures into the landscape. The theme of and then they talk about, oh, this is just all silly nonsense. No, he was changing, they could change them, and there is a great variety among the types of transformations that took place. They could go from animals to inanimate objects like the Nile River or who knows what. They could become constellations. They could go into becoming animals or plants. They could change from animals into ants and fungus or mushrooms into humans, from one sex to another, from one color to another, and pebbles. They could be anything they wanted. They controlled matter. All right, and Metamorphoses, that was the whole theme of this whole thing, was that's why they were so powerful. And that's why this is so insane. They could actually control matter, and they're still around here somewhere because they don't die. Where are they? What are they doing? I don't know. I have read some stories about in the Gnostic texts about Jesus possibly taking away some of their powers so that they can't get to each other in the heavens anymore, which there were battles in the heavens before. Now, I don't know if that, I don't, at that point, it's all becomes theoretical. I'm not a theoretical guy. I'm a physical guy. This you can read. My stuff you can see. All right, so I've shown stuff like that. That's biological. That right there is from a gigantic, gigantic creature. And even in space, I've shown all this stuff over and over and over. And it's just too much for academics to accept that you can get blood out of a stone. That's a heart. That's the red blood side. That's where the black blood is. And this is where the serum blends together. It's a black, yellow, and red. And this is where they went up. And see that black? That black on top is like painted on there. They don't mix together, the black and the red. That's why you get iron banding and they pop apart. And you only get the inside of hearts in space. You see, that's the inside of the heart. That's what a heart looks like if you took out the plumbing off the top. You get right to here. And it does. It pops right off because of the iron banding, which goes right around here. And I've shown that over and over and over as well. You see how the black stays away from the red before the blue it turns black in the mud fossils. They just went snapped and this just floats off into space, and that is what we are looking down into the valves that control the flow of blood in and out. And they're very, very easy. I mean, just you can't miss it. Plus, then you got other things like hip joints in space. Shown that bazillion times. Comic 67p. I showed the arteries, showed the tendons, showed everything. And the chemistry is there as well. It's polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. It has all of the different oxidation states of the blood, and the whole, there's just no missing this. It can't be missed. It cannot be missed. There's tubes coming out of that. That's not craters. Tubes. Tubes. Another one here. Those are heart valves. Those are the colors. And they're going out to here because there's a ton of metals, because there's a ton of metals in blood. And I've shown all the other bits and pieces, and they came back from Bennu with heart sarcomeres, just like this heart. These are heart sarcomeres right here. And the membranes. And this is here on Earth, been here for 2 years, and they still won't admit what it is. They know, they can see it. They say, admit it has all the stuff I'm saying. It's all the amino acids and all of the things that are biological. And it has the layers of these phosphates, which they never expected. And it has the bundles of muscle, which they never expected. It has the sarcomeres, which they never expected. And that's because they went deep inside and actually grabbed a chunk of the actual muscle and it's like clay. And I think it's still got moisture in here. I mean, this could be like viable flesh. In space, it's probably cold enough, unless it gets close to the sun, starts getting cooked. If you got down inside it here, you're going to have some wet flesh. I mean, it's got to have wet and a lot of wetness to be blowing off like that. And that is going to be pointed at the sun, because the sun is here cooking it off. And that's what they're talking about, 3IA asteroid is something unusual, because they're shooting rays out towards the sun. Well, that's going to be towards the sun too. So, and it's shooting that big thing out of here, 500 feet across is the artery. All right, these are big, 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 big things out there. And the Earth is made of big, 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 big things too. Those little layers of tissue. I think it's time we start re-examining the top of a heart. That's where the plumbing is. It came right off the bottom of the heart, which is right there. It was right up on top. He hit it with a hammer, bam, and it just opened right up. That's what they do, because it's iron banding. You see, this is 15 books. It outlines everything that happened in history. And this guy really went into extreme details. Book 1, the creation of everything, ages of mankind, the flood. This is the flood where all the mud fossils were preserved. Deucalion is Noah, that's his wife, and he was told to create a chest, which is the ark, to save himself from this great flood. And this is the flood. The flood myth, which is not a myth, a deluge myth is a myth in which a great flood, usually sent by a deity or deities, and it was Venus, who almost hit Earth, or did hit Earth, created Grand Canyon, I believe, and at the same time washed over the entire Earth with supersaturated silicates that form in a ooze on the ocean floor. It came up and solidified virtually everything in the mud fossils using silicon dioxide, quartz. It invaded all the little tiny holes and adhered to all kinds of stuff. It made feldspar. I understand this stuff very, very well now. I've been studying it for a very long time, and I fully understand it, and I would love to speak to somebody about it. Now, we're going to go to Perseus, because that is just a fabulously intriguing story about how he... Well, let's go into it. Okay, before we get into what was written, I want to support what I have to say. I believe this was one of those creatures, a giant, that was turned into stone for some reason, and this was forced to strangle his little dragon buddy here. And they did that to another one. We're going to get into this quite deeply soon, but I just want to give you a couple other... Look at this one. There's another giant god, and he's strangling a little puppy or something. Now, the reason I know these things are real, and they can be tested, it's not something that can't be tested. That is black blood. That's blood running down his arm. That's where your blood ends up going to. Now, this could easily be sampled and looked at. That's it broke there, and it's fusing out. The moss all around here is because of the runoff of body fluids. And that's why you see like this right here. I believe that's also a real creature. At one time was real. And this is all blood that creates this extreme green moss. And it is just still coming out. And here's some kind of creature. Look, this is a kid's legs. This is in the Czech Republic, and it's real. This came a long time ago. This was not just last week when I started with this nonsense, this AI stuff. And it looks like a flea, which would be saturated with blood, and it's got a lot of moss. The moss, look at this. Moss loves red blood. Now, what's flowing out of this chest of this woman? Red blood. That's where the heart is, right there. Coming right out of here. And they did this, as Ovid said, really just for fun. In some cases I read where they just did it to make gardens. And then when you see, have somebody explain how this is possible. This eroded away out here. That, my friends, right there, is a tendon. Now look at the edges of it. Here's one edge, which is inside. See how it's like almost the outside, like this deep, has turned to stone. I can't explain that, but I can see it. I can see it. And coming out of there, this is cartilage. This is the bump that goes right over the knee, the patella, the kneecap, whatever you want to call it. And then this big tendon runs all the way down. And right behind it is a big muscle, your calf. And that's saturated with blood, which this is. And they say, oh no, that's just iron oxide. Well, where do you think iron oxide comes from? Blood is literally almost 100% iron. It's much, much dense with iron than anything else. It's not just fluid. And that's where red blood comes from, which is iron. Or iron comes from red blood, whichever way you want to go. But as far as I'm concerned, I don't think anybody can explain this, other than the fact that that was a creature's body. You just saw the way it works. This is that big white strap that runs right down the front. And right behind it is right there was all the blood was leaking out from the muscle. It's not, I mean, it's completely, totally, 100% obvious. You can see the kneecap is that wrinkly spot that runs over the top. And there it is right there. There's the kneecap, and there's that tendon. And right behind it is the bloody muscle. It's undeniable. As far as I'm concerned, that's 100% case closed. And I'm going to tell you right now, this can be tested. And the way it has to be tested was you drill up inside, away from any exposure, basically, so you're up inside and you extract the red blood out of there. And you'll be able to easily, I mean, you can see it. It's just red, it's almost, there's going to be plenty of good blood in there to sample. I'm going to tell you right now, my stuff was basically the same thing. Red, very red, fleshy blood that I took out. I had it sampled for DNA, and it was human mitochondrial DNA. That means the mother's side. I still have all the stuff. It could be tested. And it's very easy to test it. I had 3 of them DNA tested, so. And now they stopped. I can't find anybody to do it on what I consider to be pre-flood creatures that were just, the gods were just playing around here. All right, the reason I'm making such a big deal out of the moss is because it comes from blood. They sell blood meal, which instantly turns your plants very green because you get a lot of nitrogen in and so forth. Now, and I do a little bit of the chemistry, so I kind of understand what's going on here. And like, you see this right here? You see what the hell is going on there? All of these little balls are covered with moss. Well, why? And they're all covered with the same kind of moss. That's just kind of unusual, don't you think? And what are all these balls doing? Why are these balls everywhere? There's just zillions of them. It's because the earth was constructed of a creature's body or creatures' bodies, and inside a creature's body is this, where it has all these little balls. And this is a close-up of how many balls there are inside the skin, basically, so it can flip and squish around all this way and come back to where they're anchored. This is what this is all about. This is a, sort of a sketch of what it is. But this is what it is on the earth. That's skin. That right there is skin. And that right there is the collagen flesh right here. Underneath collagens, keratins, those stone balls, a lot of silicon. And they erode from here in the ocean and run down, and what's left is those balls that are very, very hard. They lay in the mud. So this becomes mud. The balls that are in here settle down into the mud, and then moss eats them, exactly as is happening in Alaska. Now this is in the United Kingdom, and then here in the United States we have the Moki marbles, which are exactly the same, only they have already been eaten all the way down to the stone. There's a stone in the center, and that's the anchor, and around it is a fleshy ball of flesh. And that's what they're eating right here. And the same thing in Alaska. They're eating the flesh. And inside this is this, which is the ball right here. And it was right around that ball was loaded with flesh. And all these things are eating the red blood and the fleshy material. All this plant life. And these actually turn. And you can see it's swept up here. It's going to turn this way towards, I believe, the sunlight, and drag this part back up to get grown, and it just keeps going around, around, around. It never takes root. That's the stone right there. All right? That is what will be left after they eat over. This is eating all the way down to here. That's what it wants to do. That's where the roots are taking root. So I'm not making things up here. That's how big the creatures on Earth were. These are the little balls left inside, and this is a bazillion of them. You see how many of them there are? Look. That's because there are that many inside, and they're all over the Earth. It's not just here or there. Nobody's ever been able to figure them out, so they just don't talk about them. All right, we're going to get into the text in a minute. But I look for the details. Now people say, oh, look, they built it with iron rods and so forth. No, that's not true. This was an attempt to try to fix what was broken up here, and they put in rebar thinking that would help him to his ear and so forth. Well, you can't do much once it starts falling apart, and certainly not with iron. It swells up as it rusts. Now, I believe this right here, that right there is actually inside onto his tissue. And I also believe this is exactly what you'd see if you showed this to a orthopedic surgeon or somebody that does shoulders. I don't know what they call them, but this is bundles of muscle, tendon, bone attachments, so forth. It's a complicated little web. You see that? Look at that. A guy that knows what he's doing anatomically will know what these things are, and he'll call it some kind of muscle and so forth. But this was an attempt to repair. That was not original. This is original, and it broke right off. They seem to break off just as flat as a pancake in a lot of cases. Not every time, but most often. Now look at this. I look for something like this and I say, whoa. That's blood. That's blood, and you would. There's a lot of blood in your head, and right through the temples here is kind of a weak spot, and I think that's where some blood, and of course out of your eyeballs in that area, it's kind of weak fleshy stuff. It's not like bone holding everything, and inside, way inside is the blood. No, and even flesh. Flesh is pretty thick until you get down to where there's a big blood flow. Now, feathers, I don't know. Maybe they're, because this is, as far as I'm concerned, this was a living statue, a living creature. Look at the finger. Fingers are where blood flows to the bottom. There's going to be, I can see there's a a pin in that. Now, what that's all about, I don't know. I don't, you know, see, when I see stuff like that, then I try to think, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this wasn't an actual creature. But I see blood right where that is, just same spot in your arm where they draw blood from, is right there. These are the things that got to be looked at. Somebody's got to look into them. They're spectacular, they're insane, they're crazy. I never said that's not true. That is 100% true. They are the craziest things. It's disturbing. It's marvelous. It's crazy. Look at this. Who would make that? And then I look and I see where I can see any kind of colors and textures and, you know, anything decay. You know, this one is still in absolutely fabulous shape. But look at that. Now, did they just put this on top of here to take it from somewhere? I don't know. It could have been, you know, this stuff, I don't know for sure 100% that I'm right. But I think I am. And when I see stuff like this, I'm not going to accept anybody else's opinion that that's just, oh, that's just red spot happened to be there. No, that is from blood leaking out from a heart. And Ovid said they did all this stuff. Now, you can laugh about all these ancient stories. I call them ancient history. You call them myth, good for you. I don't go with that anymore whatsoever. Okay, to really fully understand this, you have to know a little chemistry. And the blood has all these metals. It's all those metals. Primarily, it's iron, which holds on to the oxygen. And there's a couple of states of iron, and you know, there's transition metals here. See, iron is 2 and 3. The 2 is the used up blood, and the 3 is the iron, the oxygen pumped up. And this is just a little sculpture here, but this is what the transition metals do. And those are these things right here. Whoops. Right in the middle. Those transfer things in your body. With all these charges, these +2s and 3s and 7s and all that stuff. So it can drag chemicals and drop them off, and drag other stuff and drop them off, and then it just keeps getting recharged. So you have to know a little bit about that. And then the collagen, this is where your tendons are and your skin and all that fabric-y stuff. And I always talk about leucine-rich proteins. Well, proteins are amino acids. And here's like, you see this leucine here? Leucine, all these different types, hydrocarbons primarily. CHs all over the place. All right, and when these things decay and break down, the hydrocarbons come out, and that's what we got now. Because a lot of they don't break down until you reach a certain temperature and condition. And when they're frozen, they don't break down. They just stay in their state. But now that everything is warming up, and these things everything's melting away from them, they're starting to grow. That's when the enzymes kick in at a certain temperature. They say, okay, it's time to grow. We're out. We're ready to go. And that's done. And when it does, they move pretty quick. And we're in that warming phase. It's not good. All right, take one last look here. We're going to go into the text. And like I say, there was Ovid, there was Apollodorus, Hesiod, and there was some other ones that wrote, but those are my 3 big guys. And then, of course, you got the Nag Hammadi text now. That is afterwards, but that is when Jesus, the Savior, to save us from this insanity. This was insanity. They were turning people, they were doing absolutely crazy things until God intervened and had the flood. And these are, as far as I'm concerned, these were pre-flood creatures that were turned into stone, and they survived the flood somehow. All right, this is just as crazy as it can be. But this is Apollodorus, and this is, we're at book 2, I think. Yeah, we're at book 2, Perseus. all right, and his sons of Perseus. Now, this is just as crazy as it gets. All right, having now gone through the family of Deucalion, who is Noah, in the Greek, they called him Deucalion. In the Roman, they called him Noah. All right, so you got Greeks, anyway. So they're talking about Noah. They went through the family of Deucalion, who is Noah. We have next to speak about that of Incus, Inachus, Ocean, and Tethys, who was the moon. That's an ocean, and Tethys is a moon. They had a son, Incus, after whom a river in Argos is called Inchus. He and Melina, daughter of Ocean, had sons, Poronius and Elegius. And Elegius, having died childless, the whole country was called Agilia. And Poronius reigned over the whole land, afterwards named Peloponnese, begat Apis and Niobe, remember that name, by a nymph, Telodice. Apis converted his power into a tyranny and named the Peloponnese after himself, Appia. Okay, so that's Apis. But being a stern tyrant, he was conspired against and slain by Telexian and Telchus. He left no child, so he had no kids. Being deemed a god, was called Seriphus. But Niobe had by Zeus. Now Zeus was the god of the gods at that time, supposedly. Niobe had by Zeus, and she was the first mortal woman with whom Zeus cohabited. So that's the first mortal woman that he came down and had sex with, supposedly. They had a son called Argus, and also, so says Aculesius, a son, Pelagus, after whom the inhabitants of the Peloponnese were called Pelagians. However, Hesiod says that Pelagus was a son of the soil. Pelagus came part of the earth. Now, Hesiod was told what to write by the daughters of Zeus. That was right out of the mouth of God, basically. God was Zeus in those days. That's what the story is. Now, so we're talking about the Pelagesians, and Hesiod said Pelagus was a son of the soil. About him I shall speak again. But Argus received the kingdom. He got everything, and called the Peloponnese after himself Argus, having married Evadnia, the daughter of Strymon and Neura. He begat Echabus, Pyrrhus, Epidaurus, and Circus, who also succeeded to the kingdom. Now, Echabus had a son, Agnor, and Agnor had a son, Argus, the one who is called the all-seeing. He had eyes in the whole of his body. Now, can you imagine that? He had eyes in the whole of his body. And being exceedingly strong, he killed the bull that ravaged Arcadia and clad himself in its hide. And when a satyr wronged the Arcadians and robbed them of their cattle, Argus withstood and killed them. It is said, too, that Echidna, daughter of Tartarus and Earth, Echidna, daughter of Tartarus and Earth, all right, Tartarus and Earth had sex, and not only did they give birth to Echidna, they gave birth to the dragon in the desert, which is Typhon. That's also written, and he was to avenge Earth. Now listen to it. So it is said, Echidna, daughter of Tartarus and Earth, who used to carry off passers-by, was caught asleep and slain by Argus. He also avenged the murder of Apis by putting the guilty to death. All right, so he's a pretty tough guy. Argus and Ismene, daughter of Asopus, had a son, Iasus, who is said to have been the father of Io, who is another moon. But the annalist Castor and many of the tragedians allege that Io was a daughter of Incus, and Hesiod, who was a writer, and Archaeologists say that she was a daughter of Pyrrhon. So there's some controversy about who said what and who was what and all that. Now, Zeus seduced her while she held the priesthood of Hera, but being detected by Hera, he by a touch turned Io into a white cow and swore that he had not known her. In other words, he was not having sex with her. That's just a cow, you know. Wherefore Hesiod remarks that lovers' oaths do not draw down the anger of the gods. That's just get crazy. Hera requested the cow from Zeus for herself and set Argus, the all-seeing, to guard it. Perseus says that this Argus was son of Arestor, but Asaphates says that he was son of Incus, and Cercops says that he was son of Argus and Ismene, daughter of Asopus. So a lot of different stories here. But Achuslius says that he was earth-born. He tethered her to the olive tree, which was in the grove of Mycenae. But Zeus ordered Hermes to steal the cow, and as Hermes could not do it secretly, because Hyrax had has blabbed, so Zeus ordered Hermes to steal the cow. Hermes could not do it secretly because Hyrax had blabbed. He was told, no, he's going to steal the cow. So he killed Argus by the cast of a stone, whence he was called Argodaeus. Hera next sent a gadfly to infest the cow. She didn't like that cow because she knew Zeus was having sex with her. An animal came first to what is called after her the Ionian Gulf. Then she journeyed through Illyria, and having traversed Mount Haemus, was the mountain of blood. Haemus is the blood. She crossed what was then called the Thracian Straits, but is now called after her the Bosphorus. Having gone away to Scythia and Cimmerian land, she wandered over great tracts of land and swam wide stretches of sea, both in Europe and Asia, until at last she came to Egypt, where she recovered her original form and gave birth to a son, Ephesus, beside the river Nile. Now him Hera besought the Curetes to make away with. So she gave birth to the child who was going to be the ruler, I guess. It says him Hera besought the Curetes to make away with. And make away with him they did. When Zeus learned of it, he slew the Curetes, but Io set out to search of the child. She roamed all over Syria because it was revealed to her that the wife of the king Byblos was nursing her son. Having found Ephesus, she came to Egypt and was married to Lagans, who then reigned over the Egyptians. And she set up an image of Demeter, whom the Egyptians called Isis. And Io likewise they called by the same Isis. All right, so there's where the name Isis comes in. Now, reigning over the Egyptians, Ephesus married Memphis, daughter of the Nile. She was born from the Nile River, founded and named the city of Memphis after her, and begat a daughter, Libya, after whom the region of Libya was called. Libya had by Poseidon, he was the one with the trident. She had twin sons, Ergon and Belus. Anger departed to Phoenicia and reigned over there, and there he became the ancestor of the great stock. Hence we shall defer our account of him, so forget about him. But Belus remained in Egypt, and he reigned over the country and married Anchnoa, daughter of the Nile, by whom he had twin sons, Egyptus and Darnassus. But according to Euripides, he had also Cephas and Phineas. Darnassus was settled by Belus in Libya, and Egyptus Arabia. But Egyptus subjugated the country and of the Melopods and named it Egypt after himself. Both had children by many wives. Egyptus had 50 sons, and Dionysius 50 daughters, as they afterwards quarreled concerning the kingdom. Dionysius feared the sons of Egyptus, and by the advice of Athena he built a ship, being the first to do so, and having put his daughters on board he fled. And touching at Rhodes, he set up the image of Linead Athena. Boy, this gets really deep. This goes on forever and ever. I just skipped through a lot. Now, let's get down to where we're talking about Zeus and Perseus and Medusa. When Acrisius inquired of an oracle how he should get male children, the god, which was the oracle, said that his daughter would give birth to a son who would kill him. So fearing that, Acrisius built a brazen, bronze chamber underground, and there guarded Danae, which was his daughter, so she couldn't get pregnant. However, she was seduced, some say by Proteus, whence arose the quarrel between them. But some say Zeus had intercourse with her in the shape of a stream of gold, like rain. It poured through the roof into Danae's lap. When Acrisius afterwards learned that she had got a child by Perseus, he would not believe that she had been seduced by Zeus. And putting his daughter with the child in a chest, he cast it into the sea. The chest was washed ashore, and Cepheus and Dictys took up the boy and reared him. All right, so now this is where he becomes Perseus. All right, so Perseus became a grown man. He called together his friends, including Perseus. So now the king is still worried about Perseus. And his daughter Danae fell in love with Perseus, I guess, but could not get access to her because Perseus was grown to man's estate. This gets a little tricky. Hold on a second. All right, yep, this is what's going on here. He put his daughter, with the child in a chest and threw him in the sea. Figured that's the end of him. But they washed up on a shore, and Dictys took up the boy and reared him. So that's Perseus. All right. Now, Polydectes was the brother of Dictys. All right. So they were brothers. And he was the king and fell in love with Danae, which was the girl that Perseus that was Perseus's. All right, oh boy, this gets complicated. Danae was Perseus's mother by Zeus. So Zeus got her pregnant in the bronze cage, and she got Perseus. Now, Perseus ends up being the one is supposed to kill her father. All right, so the oracle said, "Your son will kill you." So he had her locked up. Perseus got born because Zeus got to Danae, whatever, through a golden shower, let's say. Now, Polydectes was the brother of Dictys, so they were the same age, I suppose. And he wanted Danae, which is Perseus's mother, but he couldn't get access to her because Perseus was a grown man. So he called together his friends, including Perseus, under the pretext of collecting contributions towards a wedding gift for Hippodamius, daughter of so-and-so, Onomus. Now, Perseus, having declared he would not stick which he would do whatever was right, even in the face of the Gorgon's head, which would turn you to stone. Polydictes required the others to furnish horses, so all of these friends had to bring horses. And not getting horses from Perseus, he ordered him to bring the Gorgon's head. Because he said, I won't run, even even in the face of the Gorgon's head. So he says, you bring me the Gorgon's head. So under the guidance of Hermes and Athena, Hermes made him the helmet, and Athena, I'm not sure, he made his way to the daughters of Procus, who were Enyo, Perito, and Dino, for Procus had them by Ceto, and they were sisters of the Gorgons. All right, so the Gorgons were some kind of really unbelievable. Listen to this. The old woman from their birth. So the Gorgons were old women even when they were first born. The three had one eye and one tooth, all between the three of them. And these they passed to each other in turn. All right, so Perseus got possession of the eye and the tooth, and when they asked them back, he said he would give them up if they would show him the way to the nymphs. Now the nymphs had winged sandals and kibyssus, which they say was a wallet. All right, and that's what he's going to put the Gorgon's head in. Pindar and Hesiod and Shield say of Perseus, all his back had on the head of a dread monster, and round him ran the kibyssus. But all his back had on the head of a dread monster, which was the Gorgon. I don't know what that means. The kibyssus is so called because dress and food are deposited in it, so it's like a satchel. They had also the cap of Hades, that's with the wings. When the Perseus had shown him the way, he gave them back the tooth and the eye, and coming to the nymphs, got what he wanted. So he slung the wallet around him, fitted the sandals to his ankles, and put the cap on his head. Anyway, wearing it, he saw whom he pleased, but was not seen by others. So he's invisible, but he could see. Having received also from Hermes an adamantine sickle, that's the sharpest thing there is, it can cut anything. He flew to the ocean and caught the Gorgons asleep. They were Steno, Uraeo, and Medusa. Now, Medusa alone was mortal, so she wasn't a god, appeared. For that reason, Perseus was sent to fetch her head. But the Gorgons had heads twined about with scales of dragons and great tusks like swines. Yikes! And brazen hands and golden wings by which they flew. They turned to stone such as beheld them. So you looked at them, you turn to stone. So Perseus stood over them as they slept, and while Athena guided his hand, and he looked with averted gaze on a brazen shield. So he's looking into like a mirror. He's not looking at her. He's looking into a mirror at her head. So he averted his gaze into a brazen shield in which he beheld the image of the Gorgon. He beheaded her. When her head was cut off, there sprang from the Gorgon's head a winged horse, Pegasus, and Cerysor, the father of Geryon. These she had by Poseidon. All right, so Perseus put the head of Medusa in that wallet, a satchel, and went back again, but the Gorgons started up from their slumber and pursued Perseus. They could not see him on account of the cap, for he was hidden by it. He was invisible. So, being come to Ethiopia, of which Cephas was king, he found the king's daughter Andromeda set out to be the prey of a sea monster. They said the king's daughter they were going to give to some sea monster. This is just yikes. All right, for Cassiopea, the wife of Cephas, vied with the Nereids in beauty and boasted to be better than them all. Hence the Nereids were angry and Poseidon, sharing their wrath, sent a flood and a monster to invade the land. I'm prettier than you, I'm going to go invade your land. Yikes. Ammon, having predicted deliverance from the calamity if Cassiopea's, all you got to do is put your daughter out there. Listen to this. Ammon, having predicted deliverance from this calamity if Cassiopeia's daughter Andromeda were exposed as a prey to the sea monster. Cephas was compelled by the Ethiopians to do it. You got to do this for us. And he bound his daughter to a rock. When Perseus beheld her, he loved her and promised Cephas that he would kill the monster if he would give him the rescued damsel to be his wife. These terms having been sworn to, Perseus withstood and slew the monster, released Andromeda. However, Phineus, who was a brother of Cephas and to whom Andromeda had been first betrothed, plotted against Perseus. Perseus discovered the plot, and by showing him the Gorgon's head, turned him and his fellows, all these conspirators, at once into stone. Yep, see you later, guys. Having come to Seriphus, he found that his mother and Dictys had taken refuge at the altars on account of the violence of Pelicides. So he entered the palace. Now listen to this now, this is cool. He entered the palace where Pelicides had gathered his friends. All right, and with averted face, he showed the Gorgon's head, and all who beheld it were turned to stone, each in the attitude which he happened to have when he was struck. Having appointed Dictys king of Seriphus, he gave back the sandals and wallet and cap to Hermes, but the Gorgon's head he gave to Athena. Hermes restored the aforesaid things to the nymphs. He gave everybody back everything. And Athena inserted that Gorgon's head into the middle of her shield. But it is alleged by some that Medusa was beheaded by Athena's sake, and they say that the Gorgon was fain to match herself with the goddess even in beauty. Everything's about beauty with these people. Perseus hastened with Danae and Andromeda to Argos in order that he might behold Acrisius. But he, learning of this and dreading the oracle, forsook Argos. Okay, as you have seen, I think you might agree that creatures were turned to stone. That just happened. I can't explain how it was done, but it was done by divine intervention of some sort. We've gone through Perseus and Medusa. You can go up here and study all you want, but I'm going to leave it at that for today. All right, thank you.